Hello again, I'm Stephen Wells, the host of the Motoring Weekly podcast for the Australian Historic Road and Racing community. This is episode 171. Last year, I finally joined the Classic Rally Club after being a participant on the Autumn Glory Tour in 2023 that covered Northern Victoria, which was an enjoyable few days with rally enthusiasts from many different states and territories across Australia. I also covered the Isle of Man rally for Motoring Weekly earlier in the year. Listen to episodes 134 through 137 for that event. So it was fabulous to interview Geoffrey Bott, a pioneer of classic rallies in Australia. He designed, developed and then acted as the clerk of the course for the first Repco Mountain Rally before handing over and becoming a competitor after a few years. He has decades of experience with this type of motorsport. And Geoffrey's also a Jaguar man, having had a range of cars from Browns Lane in Coventry. However, as you'll hear, he also had a vehicle that could be called a unicorn, a Hunter Coupe, which has absolutely nothing to do with a Hillman. Here's the interview with Geoff, where we kind of meander through several related topics. Well, I'm pleased to have Geoff Bott with me today on the podcast, and Geoff is an ex-rally director. He's a driver in classic rallies and has had quite a long history of the classic rally scene. And Geoff has actually been a director of a rally that had been running for a number of years that I want to talk about first. So welcome, Geoff, to the podcast.
Good afternoon, Stephen. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And that rally that I want to ask first is the Repco Mountain Rally. And I'd like to sort of get a feel of where it was held.
Okay, well, the mountain rally essentially was an idea that I put together way back some more than 30 years ago now. I was inspired by videos of the Pirelli marathon, which ran through Europe. And I put a proposal to the Jaguar Club to run a similar event with the idea of running a substantial rally that put together relationships with various Jaguar clubs, such as the Hunter Valley, Bathurst, and the Canberra, and such like. The whole idea was to bring all these people together to run a week-long event, which consisted largely of competition and navigational aspects.
Okay. And so the Pirelli Mountain Rally was in Europe. Was that through the Alps, or did they have a different location each year for what they were doing?
Yeah, it was actually the Pirelli Marathon. Obviously, Pirelli sponsored it, and it ran. Well, they usually started it somewhere in the UK, like London, went across the Channel, and then right through the Alps, right through to places like Italy and such like. So, yeah, it was a major event, and it usually ran over a week.
Yeah. And when did that start? Was that sort of the 50s and 60s when that started?
It was probably about, let's see, 1990, late
Okay.
late 80s, and I think the event actually still is going to a certain extent, but not
Yeah.
the level it was. It
Right.
was really a major event that was pretty well standalone at the time before these sorts of events got really
Yeah.
popular
Yeah.
around the world.
It sounds like something that had a lot of tradition to it. So when you think about the rallying, especially, in Europe at the time, to me it felt like it had been running for quite a while because of the types of things that were going on in Europe at the time.
Yeah. It attracted a lot of famous names like Paddy Hopkirk and Sterling Moss and various other people who were extremely famous from that earlier period. Sadly, a lot of them have left us now in
Mm.
the intervening 30 odd years,
Yeah.
but it really got a lot of exposure
Yeah.
way back when.
And that was open to all makes, marks, models at the time, or did that have a strict entry?
No, it was basically suited to anybody who could afford the entry fee, I think. But
Yeah.
those major names that I just
Mm.
mentioned were some of the key people that really brought it to the fore in the
Yeah.
media.
Mm. And for your mountain rally, you took the concept. How did you then effectively localize it? What sort of regulations did you think about putting in to create your own event?
Well, I actually got copies of the regulations
Mhm.
for that event
Mm.
and localized it to a moderate degree, but it was largely a direct pinch of their
Okay.
regulations at the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And consequently, um, we didn't have to come up with a great deal of changes.
Mm.
We largely used those regulations as they were in Europe.
Yeah. Okay. And the Jaguar drivers came on board to help out. Were you a member of the club at the time?
Yes, I'd been a member for a number of years at that stage. I put the proposal to them back in 1990. We
Hmm.
ran the first event in 1991. I initially was the clerk of course rather
Hmm.
than the director.
Yeah.
Well, several other people got involved, were inspired at the time. A fellow by the name of Doug Henderson
Hmm.
was the director of the event, but then we had uh, other people involved, such as Michael St. John Cox and various other people who were long-time
Mm.
significant members of the club at that time. It was really a major event. The idea I put forward originally was for a 5-day event, but they elected to make it a 6-day event. So we finished up with 4 days of navigation and
Hmm.
2 days of competition.
Yeah. Okay.
And the event involved all of those clubs that I mentioned before. We had a group of officials, of about 50 people all up to run the event.
Mm. Yeah. That's quite a big organization, isn't it? Mind you, if you're looking at a 6-day run, you've got to have a lot of people out on the course as well as the people doing the timing and other bits and pieces. So it would have been quite a big management to be able to make that work.
Indeed, it was.
Mm.
Well, fortunately, we had a very good team.
Mm.
Doug did put in a huge effort, and we had various members with interesting contacts. We finished up getting the support from Repco.
Hmm.
So it was actually called the Repco Mountain
Mm.
Rally, and they sponsored us for about 5 years, I
Mm.
guess.
Okay.
The head of Repco at the time was a Jaguar owner by the name of Tony Smeaton,
Mm.
and he used to run in the event in a Mark II with his wife navigating.
Mm. Let's see some of the footage of the those early years, and I just loved the different mix of cars and people that were entering and being involved. You had some very old cars, and then what would we would now probably not take on a rally, because in those days they were probably only 20 years old as opposed to being 50, 60-year old today. So some great footage was taken at the time.
Yeah, we had a minimum age. Oh, sorry.
Mm.
Well, let's see. There was an age limit. The car had to be more than 25 years old,
Hmm.
which, if you
Yeah.
think about it, meant that you couldn't run a car earlier than, well, let me think, around roughly 1970 or
Yeah.
thereabouts.
Yeah.
And yeah, we had people running things as crazy as a pre-war Rolls Royce chauffeur driven, and all sorts of interesting gadgets, and a lot of interesting cars, like you
Mm.
said.
Yeah.
One there was some really significant vehicles competing in the event.
Mm. Yeah. And what sort of typical route would you take on it? So it's obviously been run for many years, but in the early days, what sort of route did you take, and where were the competition sections?
Well, on the very first event, we had navigational section up to Newcastle area there. We actually had our first competition event on the old seaplane base
Mm.
on the lake. There was a big concrete area.
Mm.
And then we went through to places like Bathurst.
Hmm.
We were able to use various airfields and all sorts of things for speed events.
Hmm.
We went to Canberra to the old police driver
Oh, yeah.
training circuit
Yep.
there.
I've been there.
Consisted of a hill climb
Mm.
and a skid pan
Mm.
and all sorts of things. And we were very well supported by not only the local Jaguar clubs, but also MG Car Club
Mm.
got heavily involved as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Because do they still have their place up at Newcastle, the MG Club?
Uh, M, well, MG Club now have got a hill climb area not far out of
Mm.
Newcastle,
Yeah.
and that's probably the principal area that they use for
Mm.
speed events.
Yeah.
They were trying. I'm not sure what the situation is,
Mm.
whether they were going to try and develop that into a
Mm.
racetrack as well.
Yes. Yes. I remember that. So talking about 6 days, how long did it take you to define the structure of each event? What was the work effort like coming up to, the start date?
Well, I figured that it took about, well, it was a 12-month effort to get
Mm.
to get the event finalized.
Yes.
For me personally, I would have put at least 90 days of full-time effort
Mm.
into it to get it to the level that was satisfactory.
Yeah. And how many dry runs would the team have done to make sure that the routes were satisfactory and the roads were in good condition?
Well, surprisingly enough, we only usually used to do two.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we made very detailed notes and
Mm.
we'd go out for a couple of days, but
Yeah.
we'd put the entire route together on the map first,
Hmm.
and then somebody like Doug Henderson and I would go out and we would then make serious notes on the
Yeah.
entire event
Yeah.
as we saw it.
Mm. And I used to organize runs for clubs, and they were typically just day runs. So I'd do a similar thing. I'd go out the weekend before and just make sure that everything was where I expected it to be, and there were no roadworks or other issues along the way. Because the last thing you want is to find that a council has done something that completely wrecks your plans.
Oh yes, well of course we would have a sweep car go
Mm.
out on the day
Mm.
to make sure that everything was
Mm.
okay.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of these events were on bitumen,
Yeah.
so we were pretty sure that everything would be
Yes.
okay.
Yeah. And how many years were you clerk of the course?
I was clerk of the course for the first 3 years,
Hmm.
and then after that, I started competing.
Okay. Yeah. And was that in your own Jaguar?
Yes, it was. Initially, I had a Rover 3500 that
Okay.
I was using as clerk of course car.
Yeah.
And then I acquired a 1977 XJS,
Hmm.
which had belonged to Michael St. John Cox,
Mm.
actually. And I had that for a number of years. And we used that as Clark
Mm.
of the Course car. Um, then when I ran in my first event, which was in 1994, as an entrant, I was
Hmm.
running in a gadget called a 1962 JNS Hunter Coupe,
Okay. Oh
which
yeah.
was a
Yeah.
whole engine fiberglass
Yeah.
car.
I actually I saw something about one of those. I got a number of magazines recently from the 60s and 70s and 80s, and I actually found, I think it was an advertisement for the Hunter Coupe, and I'd never heard of it before, so I had to look it up and see what it was all about. So can you sort of fill me in a bit more on that car? Was it a fiberglass or was it sort of handmade out of other materials?
This is how long have you got? I'm probably the major source of information on them. I've actually got a Facebook page
Mm,
on them. Anyway, suffice to say
mm,
that my particular car was the most famous one.
yeah,
There was only about 20 of these cars made,
right.
of which only a dozen were actually full kits.
Yeah.
Mine was built by Ian and Jill Hindmarsh, who lived down at Kiama, and they built probably the best car. He was a motor mechanic, um, and it got on the road in 1962. It had a
Mhm,
grey Holden motor
mm,
and an MG gearbox, and it was quite competitive
mm,
at the time. Later on, by 1965, it had a Holden red motor,
mhm,
and eventually that was how it finished up. When I acquired the car, it was pretty tired,
mm,
and I had to do a major rebuild on it.
mhm,
By the time I finished, it was a pretty potent old gadget. I used
yeah,
to run it in historic racing in Group SB.
yeah. Okay. That sounds like a bit of fun. I've got it again, so I'll do some homework on those because the
Mm,
more I dig into things down here about the what the industry was like, I'm finding all sorts of cars that never got out of the country or were
yeah.
specials that came into the country that weren't well known elsewhere.
Mm.
So I'm always fascinated when I hear of a new vehicle and some of my research and wonder where it came from and how it was built and whether or not they were, effectively homologated or just kits that people were buying and building from the ground up.
Yeah, well, there was a number of companies that got together. There was JWF
Mhm,
Fiberglass and J&S Fiberglass were the manufacturers of the J&S Hunter.
mhm,
The Hunter was what you might call a financial flop
mm.
for the company. It was an exciting drive. It had what you might call an excess of power over adhesion.
Right.
It's pretty primitive,
Yeah.
but it had lots of grunt,
Mm.
and that was common to a lot of those specials of those days.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially with some of the European lot who are putting in big American motors into the smaller sports cars and trying
Yes.
to sort of outdo Shelby at the same game. That
Mhm.
seemed to be a big sort of common feature of the time was try and make something lightweight but not particularly user friendly. I think you'd have to have a fair bit of skill to keep some of those on the road at times.
Certainly kept you on your toes.
Now, you also have had a car that was nicknamed Arthur. Can you describe what Arthur was?
Arthur Arthur was my 1965 3.8 Series 1 fixed head coupe E-type.
Mhm,
And I acquired that in about 1995, I suppose,
mhm,
after I didn't have a great time in the first mountain rally I ran in the Hunter because the clutch died.
right.
Anyway, suffice to say that I acquired Arthur the E-type and I ran that over the next 6 years in the mountain rally and won it outright
Mm.
twice.
And why was it called Arthur?
At the time, of course, we had the Paul Hogan show on TV. One of his characters was Arthur Dunger,
Mhm,
who was, shall we say, a likable rogue. And when I acquired the E-type, it was well, let's say not in concourse condition.
Hmm.
And a friend of mine at the time, John Pearson, said, "No, you bought a Dunga, did you?" And of course, Arthur Dunga was the character. So
Yeah.
anyway, the car finished up
It
being
def-
called
it
Arthur.
does that. But you then presumably got it back to tip-top shape again.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes, indeed. Well, it survived about 50,000 kilometres
Mm,
of various rallies,
mm, yeah.
including not only the mountain rally, but things like the Grand Prix rally and God knows what else.
Right.
I've lost track of them all
Right.
now.
So you were fairly involved in that type of motorsport during those years.
Absolutely,
Mm.
yeah. Mm.
And did you have the same team around you, or did you have different navigators along the way? How did you manage your team of people within each event?
Well, I had a number of different navigators at various times. Life gets in the way
Mm,
of people's participation in these sorts of things. However, in fact, John Pearson navigated for me on a number of
mm,
occasions.
yeah.
I've lost track of John these days, but
Mm,
my principal navigator was a fellow by the name of Mark Laidley.
hmm.
And Mark lived in Melbourne and he was a top navigator.
Yeah.
We did at least 3 events together and we won 2 of them
Mm,
with him
yeah.
navigating for me.
Yeah. Was that when you went under the team name Fig Jam?
Yes, that's
Yes.
correct.
Yeah. And I suspect that you proved that the name was right.
You could say that. We did
Yes.
actually have 3 cars with that
Oh,
name. So,
okay. Right. At the same time or in succession?
well, they weren't my cars, of course,
Right.
but
Yeah.
there was a team prize, you see,
Oh, okay. Right.
and you had to have 3 cars in it, and
Yeah.
obviously you had to finish and
Yes.
be in a reasonable place to get the team's
Mm.
award, and that
Yeah.
was quite popular at the time.
Yes. And were they all Jags in the team or was it a mixed
No,
team?
no, no. We one there was different cars in the team. There was a couple of guys from uh, Brisbane
Hmm.
in a Lancia,
Mm.
um, and to be frank, I'm find it a bit difficult to remember them all now, but it's rather a long time ago.
Yeah, it is. It's what, 30, 40 odd years ago now.
Well, yes, 25 to 30 years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you know, and a lot changes in that time.
right. So
Did you do any other rallies in the way of clerk of the course or designing, or did you get involved in helping others to design rallies?
I started what's called currently the Alpine Classic with the
Hmm.
Classic Rally Club.
Yeah.
That was about, well, let me think. Um, that was a good 25 odd years
Mm,
ago.
okay.
Um, and I haven't been involved in running events much
Mm,
after that, but that
mm,
was an attempt at running a commercial event.
mm,
We
yeah.
had about 65 cars run in it,
Mhm.
and it was after the general theme of the mountain rally,
Yeah.
and that was a 2-day event.
Right. And presumably that was down in what I think we call the Southern Alps, being around Jindabyne and places like that.
Not so much. It went rather focused out towards the western part of New South
Okay.
Wales, but we would finish up at places like the Hydro Majestic Hotel at Katoomba, for
Okay.
example.
Okay. All right. So a different type of mountain that I'm thinking of.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, we don't really have mountains in the European sense.
No, but they are, there is they do call, the Alpine region down south. So, it
Yes.
sort of gave me a feel that it might have been down there as well. Um, and going back to Jaguar, you've clearly been an enthusiast for many, many years. How many have you had all up?
I think it was a sad case, actually. I haven't actually totted them up, but I would imagine I'm up to about my 15th
Okay.
Jaguar at this
Yeah.
stage.
Well, I sort of come out of a Jaguar family. So, in fact, I've been putting together some pictures for another club because they wanted members to talk about their motoring history. And I've gone back to, on my father's side, it was motorcycles, but on my mum's side, my grandmother had an XK 150 that she bought in the late 50s, which was a lightweight model. And then that progressed with my parents to 2.4s and 240s, and then to an XJ6. But both my uncles ran E-types, both 4.2s, one on the track and one on the road. And both my elder brothers worked for Jaguar for a while, one for quite a long time, but the other one for, I don't know, maybe 8 years or so. So that's kind of been the family sort of background has always been Jag. So when I grew up, there was always some floating around somewhere in the family. And then I went to the dark side when I came out here to go Italian instead.
So you've never actually owned a Jag
I
yourself,
haven't, no, but the others have. Yeah, you know.
right?
Um, but growing up, we used to go into Europe every year in either the 2.4 or the 240 or the XJ6. So we would get shoved into a car for 3 days and end up in Switzerland or Germany or somewhere like that, have 2 weeks there. And it was one of those, when you talk about the Pirelli Marathon Rally, I sort of, it throws me back to when I was a youth going through the real Alps in the cars and my father sort of doing ongoing repairs to some of them as and when needed. But just the fact that we were stuck in a car for 3 days, going through Europe to get somewhere, and then being given an experience of how other people lived, which was always good.
Sure. Yes. Well, Europe being, uh, if you like, rather small by comparison,
Yes.
we've got lots of flat dirt. Um, so you certainly get a lot of variety in a
Mm,
short space in Europe.
mm. But it's also, I think, it's more built up. So, you go from village to village or from township to township, whereas here you can go for an hour or so if you're out further west, where you just, as you said, it's the plains or there's not an awful lot out there.
Mm.
And I guess when you were doing your rallies, there was far less communication technology at the time to
Well,
be
zero
able, yeah.
actually.
Well, you'd have landlines, but nothing else. But so I think, when I look back at what you guys are doing, you were in an environment where you couldn't just call up somebody and say, I've broken down. You'd have to wait for other competitors or a sweep car to come through and help out.
That's right.
You
Yes.
know?
Well, what the sweep car was usually a bloke called Graham Lord, or alternatively, a guy from the NRMA
Mhm.
who was very enthusiastic.
Mm,
Trevor was his name. I can't remember his last name now, but um, Trevor and Graham were extremely good, and what they couldn't
mm,
fix, well, usually meant it would have been a pretty catastrophic
mm.
event. But we
Yeah,
never had anyone sort of left out in the
yeah,
boonies
yeah,
uh, by themselves,
yeah.
really.
And how many people did you get on them? How many teams did you get on these rallies typically?
Well, the first mountain rally, we had 110 entries.
Hmm.
That's 110 cars,
Yeah,
so
wow.
that was a pretty fair number of people.
Yeah.
If you sort of hang them all together, you're talking the best part of 400 or 500 people
Mm,
roaming around the
yeah,
countryside. By the time you took into account the officials,
yeah.
because they're almost invariably pairs and so forth.
Mm,
So yeah, it was a big deal.
mm. Yeah, and I think that goes back to the fact you're saying you had 50 odd people there doing, part of the organizational team. That really is a lot of people to corral and get together in different points and make sure that they're getting, to lunch points and to other points along the way.
Yeah, well, when I say 50 people, I'm talking probably, 25 cars for various
Yeah,
control officials. And
yeah.
then there was the scoring team
Mm.
that consisted of people like Jeff Scott, who's still a member of the
Hmm.
club, and various others. And of course, we didn't have the computerization.
Mm.
Uh, Often things were done manually in
Yeah,
those days too.
yeah.
One of the things about having so many officials was you'd have to brief them every night, and I'd have to make sure I briefed them before they got on the tips, because otherwise they got rather, shall we say, difficult to keep under control.
Yes, yes. And you didn't want to do it the next morning because they probably have a hangover.
Well, not quite, but no, they were all front up, but
Yeah,
by then they
yeah.
were a little sadder and sorry for themselves.
Yes, yes, I'm sure. I've done a few long runs over the years, and yeah, it's interesting looking at the people the morning after once they've had their dinner and a couple of beers in them along the way.
Well, speaking of good drinkers, one of the guys who was in the event was Roger Clark
Okay.
from the UK.
Yes.
And he came out here and he was involved in other events at the time, but um, we managed to con him into running in the car, and
Mm.
Doug Henderson had a Ford Escort that he put him in.
Yeah.
Anyway, Roger, shall we say, liked to drink or two at the end of the day. Also, we'd have people like Pete Gagan,
Hmm.
who was fairly able to put a few away as well. And yeah, there was quite a few. We even had Rosemary Smith turn up at one point,
Mm.
who was the famous Roots group driver in the Hillman Eve. Not
Right.
that she was in Eve at the time, but
Yeah.
yeah.
It's amazing that you are able to attract people like that. Um, Even if they'd come down for something else, the enthusiasm of being involved in something and being able for them to see different parts of Australia that they probably would have never even been to,
Mm.
um, means that they would go back and talk about their experiences with others overseas about what was going on down here. And I think, there are times when we like to talk about people who are from Australia being successful overseas, but maybe not so much about what's happened down here that others have enjoyed.
Mm.
I was listening to a podcast the other day with some historic uh, race folk, and one of them was asked if they could have entered any race in their life, what would it have been? And they said they wanted to go to Bathurst and do one of the Bathurst races because that was seen in the UK, typically the week after on national TV. But especially after the Jags came down with Tom Walkinshaw, it
Mm.
took on a different perspective because people saw the track and they saw, a different type of event that they would see in Europe.
Yes, well, that's correct. And one of the things that Europeans have mentioned when they've come out and done the Bathurst track, uh, they never realised how steep it
Mm.
was, because when you look at things on TV, it flattens them out.
Yeah, yeah.
And we actually used parts of the Bathurst circuit
Hmm.
for our speed events
Mm.
during some of the early rallies.
Yeah.
So we do a sprint up and down the pit straight, for example,
Hmm.
and then a chunk of the circuit up the hill for a hill climb, and then maybe another part later on. There was one famous incident involving Pete Gagan, and we were running what you might call a reverse hill climb
Hmm.
from up around McPhillamy Park down towards the light car club rooms.
Mm.
Anyway, there was a flag marshal after the cutting there, and Gagan was in a Mark II Jaguar and he's giving it heaps. Well, anyway, he didn't see the flag marshal
Right.
and he come hooting down Conrod Straight at full tilt. And the idea was you had to turn into the light car club rooms, which was down about half a kilometre.
Mm.
Well, there was a guy sitting on a garden chair in the middle of the track waiting to
Yes.
flag you in.
Right.
And Pete come flogging down the hill full tilt in the Mark II, which is, as you can imagine, going pretty quick and it's
Yeah.
pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And suddenly he spots this guy sitting in the middle of the road on the garden chair. And he figured, oh dear. Anyway, he chucked it sideways
Yeah.
and frightened crap out of the poor bloke in the chair and still managed to save the day
Yes.
to the car club room car park.
So you're a member of the Classic Rally Club that you mentioned earlier, and that's how I met you. In fact, I think you were on the Isle of Man rally earlier in the year. I think that's when I first saw you.
Yes.
Heading down to the south coast. Um, what's your involvement with that club today? Are you a member? You know, you said that you'd organised the Alpine Rally early on. Have you, and you said you're not doing that much. Are you just acting as a competitor now, or do you do other things?
Well, I'm member number one of the
Okay.
Classic Rally Club. I founded it
Okay.
way back when. It was some 32 years ago, whatever it is now. Suffice to say that I could see that although the Jaguar Club was very enthusiastic about things like the mountain rally, being a mark car club, I thought that eventually they would lose enthusiasm, which did in fact happen, although they still run it as from time to time as a navigational event, but it's more of a fun event than a serious thing. Anyway, suffice to say, I called the group together and said, yeah, we really need to get together and then we can have a voice with cams and such like, which of course is Motorsport Australia these days. We formed the club, and when we put together a championship with the various other clubs that were keen at the time, like Alpha and MG and such like. And anyway, the club slowly got off the ground, and of course these days we've got best part of 350 members.
Yeah, yeah. And you also, you know, as the club, still doing some very interesting runs throughout the year. Do you attend all of them, or are you a bit choosy these days as to which rallies you go to?
I don't do all of them. I've still got quite an involvement with the Jaguar Drivers Club. For example, this coming weekend, we've got our not national, we've got the All British Day and our display day, which unfortunately clashes with the event that the Classic Rally Club's organising this weekend down south. So I couldn't make it there. One of the things that caught only yesterday was the 50th anniversary of the release of the Jaguar XJS. And that's one of the major celebrations.
Okay, yeah, I'll be at Hawkesbury on Sunday at the All British Day. It's one of my favourite days. In fact, my first one that I went to, I was acting as a delivery guy with a fellow who had a number of Daimlers. So I drove one of the XJ40 style Daimlers down to King's School in Parramatta because he was taking a number of them down, and then had an opportunity to wander around and look at all of the beautiful cars sort of on site. This year they've got the old French Day round the corner as well, which will be interesting. And I know a couple of guys who are taking both a British and a French car up there on Sunday to both the events, which will be quite an interesting day. Hopefully it'll have dried out a bit from the last few days' rain.
Yes, I hope so. Well, you have to have a split personality to be involved with sprint cars.
Well, I did notice there was an event, I think in Canberra, that was for British and French cars, and they wisely chose the Spanish club as the neutral ground. And then I thought about it, maybe it wasn't neutral, knowing the relationship between the French and Spanish and the English and the Spanish over the years.
Well, I actually have had some French cars as well. Um, I had Renault 16 TSs at
Yep.
various times. They're incredible cars
Yes.
at the time.
Yep.
And also Peugeot 205
Okay.
GTI.
Yep. Well, I learnt to drive, the road car I learnt to drive in was a Renault 4 with the umbrella handle sticking out of the dashboard for the gear
Right.
lever. Um, and then my father ran American Motors Jeeps, so on farms we would run the Jeeps around the place, but road use was a very gutless Renault 4. But it did take me to, I did a racing driver's course in 1983 at Snetterton, and I lived on the furthest tip of West Wales, and Snetterton was on the furthest east of England. And it did get me to Snetterton, minus windscreen wipers or windows that would stay in. And there were a few other oddities about it at the time due to the poor condition of the car. But it got me there and back in one piece, which was good.
Optional accessories,
Yeah,
windscreen
they were.
wipers.
And it was a well-used car, put it that way. And the whole family's got fond memories of it because when you went round corners too hard, the oil light came on, so that became known as the tilt light. You know. Um, and I was going to ask you about the E-Type as well, because you've had a few of those over the years. Do you have a particular favorite E-Type?
Well, Arthur was a 3.8 Series 1,
Mhm,
and unfortunately, I had to sell it some years
mhm,
ago in order to finance the purchase of a business.
mm,
And um, I, well, let's just say the business was sufficiently successful that eventually I was able to get
yeah,
another E-Type.
yes.
And the current one, which is called
Mm.
Garfield, which was
Right.
an American car sold new in New York.
Mm,
So it's a yellow American cat.
yes.
So that's why it's called Garfield. And these days it's now right-hand drive. It's a
Mhm,
4.2
mm.
and it's a 1965 model.
Okay.
So it's still a series one with the
Yeah.
covered headlights and triple SUs.
Mm. Yeah. Uh,
That's definitely not a concourse car
mm,
either.
mm,
And I've run that in a number of rally club
mm.
events.
Okay. Do you use most of your cars in rally club events? Are you purchasing them with a view that they will end up being used that way?
Well, they've all done events, yes, at various times. Because look, primarily classic rally club events are all bitumen.
Mm.
I like to think of it as non-destructive motorsport,
Yeah.
as opposed to some of the more vigorous things. I mean, I've done half a dozen Targa Tasmanias,
Mm.
for
Okay.
example.
Yeah.
I built up a XJS specifically for that purpose,
Hmm.
ran it for a couple of years, and then my son talked me into buying we went over to the dark side
Mm.
and bought a Nissan Skyline
Okay.
GTR,
Yeah.
which was rather a different kettle of fish,
Yes. Yes.
and I still have it.
Yeah. Right. And so from a thinking about future directions, you're doing a number of rallies. You're with the Jaguar Drivers Club as well. Um, is there anything else that you get up to in the way of the classic car motorsport or events?
Well, I largely do classic rally club events, I
Mm,
suppose.
mm,
Um, Jaguar Club tends to be a little more sedentary
hmm.
these days,
Yeah.
and I guess I am too. Uh, but I've given away running in high-speed tarmac
Mm,
events.
mhm.
The cost is just completely out of the question now,
Yeah.
and so I suppose we tend to do more relaxed style of
Yeah.
events. But I'm always keen to do rally club events.
Mm,
So I've got an entry in to the next Alpine Rally,
hmm. Yeah.
which is next month,
Hmm.
and I've dragged old-time navigator out of retirement for that,
Good.
and in the form of Jeff West,
Yep.
who actually won a number of mountain rallies as a navigator
Mm.
many years ago.
Yeah. And I'm a fairly recent member of the Classic Rally Club. I joined, I think, towards the end of last year. From a competition perspective, if we could encourage people to join the club and to get involved in events, what advice would you have for them?
Well, the best thing to do is to front up, and
Hmm.
you can bring any car, really. I mean, we are non-denominational
Hmm.
in that respect. Even if you've got a late model car, it doesn't really matter.
Mm.
Um, we would prefer if you had a classic car, but the
Hmm.
simple fact of life is that it's a lot more convenient to run a more modern vehicle, and
Hmm.
besides, not everybody can afford to have
Yeah.
a classic. So essentially, it's more of a matter of attitude, coming along, getting involved in the
Hmm.
events, having some fun.
Hmm.
That's what it's all about. Because really, at the end of the day, it's a social activity.
Yeah.
We've got cars there as an excuse to get together.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got different levels, so somebody could come in, do one of the events, and then start to look at how they would improve their skills in navigation, for example, or something like that. So I think if somebody comes along, they might find that they really enjoy it. They enjoy the people that are on the rallies with them, and they're going to learn new things.
Absolutely. Well, of course, we've got at least three different levels these days. To begin with, I would suggest somebody gets involved in the tour
Hmm.
on an event, and now they'll go over virtually the same route as the actual more intense
Mm.
map reading types. Next group up is what we call apprentices, and then there's the masters, and basically the apprentices use the same instructions as the masters, but
Hmm.
they've got slightly easier instructions with
Yeah.
hints on how to do this and that.
Right.
But for the dead set serious
Mm.
types, there is the group called the masters.
Mm.
But look, once again, times have changed to a degree, and frankly, more than half of the field these days is in the tour.
Hmm.
And it's the sort of thing that you could come along with your partner and
Mm.
not necessarily have a divorce at the end of it.
Well, one hopes not.
Quite so, yeah. But anyway, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
You'll see certainly a big chunk of Australia that
Mm.
you would probably never dream of seeing otherwise on the various back roads. But
Yeah.
invariably, they're on, as I say, bitumen roads. So it's it's non-destructive motorsport, as
Yes.
I say.
Yes. Yeah. Which is, I think, one of the things that might put people off with the name rally in it,
Mm,
but knowing that it is public roads and they've been checked out and validated beforehand, as with the one that I did, the Eye of Man, I loved the roads that were going down to Merimbula and then up through Dalgety and places. I've done a few of them on the bikes over the years, but it's just gorgeous countryside,
mm,
and and you end up at lunch somewhere with a bunch of people all laughing and giggling because they've had a thoroughly good run.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, recently I was visited by my nephew from the UK, and we actually did one of the events together. He'd never done one in his
Mm.
life before, and we had a great fun hurtling around in the back blocks in the Jag,
Mm.
and we did the tour
Yeah.
component,
Yeah.
and he certainly saw a lot of things that he never anticipated
Mhm.
seeing
Yes.
when they turned up here.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think, that's for people who live in cities or areas that don't get out of their own community much, or they're sort of commuting to work and maybe pottering up to the Hunter every now and again. Getting involved in some of these events is a great way to broaden the mind along the way, because, as you said, you'll see bits of the country that you don't know existed, and you'll meet a lot of different people along the way.
Well, that's right. And if anyone who is interested should go to the Classic Rally Club website, just Google Classic Rally Club.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the website and you'll find
Yep.
that there is various videos and things there, and as well as a whole heap of hints on what to do and how to
Yep.
do it and
Yep.
all that sort of thing. And also I produce various videos on the events and such like, which will largely turn up there. Or anyway, just Google Classic Rally Club.
And I've got the link in the podcast detail already. That's a standing link in my podcast details. So if listeners click on the podcast detail, they'll find that link that they can go through and find the information that you've just spoken about.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. It's been good to catch up again, and to talk especially about the Repco Mountain Rally, because that's something, if people go and look on YouTube, they'll find videos of that as well to see how it was done in days gone by, but also marvel at some of the vehicles that were being used at the time, because there's some beautiful bits of kit running around at the time. And thanks for your time talking about Jags and the Classic Rally Club. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Anytime, Stephen. Glad to speak to you.
Yep, thank you. It was great to catch up with Jeff and learn more about his rallying exploits and the fact that he was member number 1 of the Classic Rally Club, the details of which are in the podcast detail. If you have a curiosity about getting out for a safe motorsport event, then go to the club website and see some of the information that Jeff referenced in the interview. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast through your favourite player, whether it is Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible or Samsung, or maybe even YouTube, and get the episodes delivered as they're published. Or simply subscribe to the website motoringweekly.com.au, and you'll also get notified when a new episode is published there too. You can listen to all the episodes or subscribe through a podcast app for simplicity. I'm Stephen Wells, and you've listened to Motoring Weekly, the podcast for the Australian historic road and racing community.